following news flash is brought to you by the Lone Star Lowdown, providing your daily bulletins for the commodities market. Today in history, news updates, and the inside scoop into the tides of the alternative. Markets for Wednesday, April 13th, 2016 are currently trading with gold at $1,246.13 an ounce, silver $16.29 an ounce, Texas crude $42.17 a barrel, and Bitcoin is currently sitting at about 426 U.S. currency. Today in history, the year 1970, the Apollo 13 astronauts announced, "Houston, we've got a problem," as a result of a beach-built oxygen tank exploding en route to the moon. The beginning of the Apollo 13 crisis was 46 years ago, today in history. In recent news, more than 400 protesters were arrested last Monday outside of the U.S. Capitol from an organization called Democracy Spring, which is seeking to remove special interests from politics and raise awareness for change on restrictive voter identification laws. The demonstration resulted in arrest for what U.S. Capitol Police deemed unlawful demonstration activity, such as crowding and obstruction. Apparently, the protesters were sitting on the stairs of the east front of Capitol Hill. Democracy Spring said on their website that the protest was held to demand Congress take immediate action to end the corruption of big money in our politics and ensure free and fair elections. Peter Callahan, the group's communication coordinator, stated that, quote, "We see populism on the rise on both sides of the spectrum. Americans are sick and tired of their politicians being bought and paid for. Organizers are vowing to continue the demonstration every day for the duration of a week." The Pentagon declared today that the first phase of military operations against the Islamic State in Iraq and Syria are now over, and that the second phase is being implemented. Colonel Steve Warren, the spokesman for the U.S.-led coalition fighting ISIS, stated that Phase 2 is aimed at dismantling this enemy, while Phase 3 is ultimately the defeat of ISIS. Success in the first phase included the recapture of about 40% of the territory ISIS once held and the annihilation of key leaders and revenue sources. The second phase, now underway, is focusing on fragmenting ISIS and liberating key territories under their control, like taking back Mosul in Iraq and isolating Raqqa in Syria. The Lone Star Lowdown is currently looking for sponsors. If you have a product or a service you'd like to advertise with us, feel free to give me a call at 210-363-2257. This has been Rick Rohde with your Lowdown for April 13th, 2016.
Hey friends, good evening and welcome here on this, it would be a Thursday night, the 14th of April, 2016. And it's time for INN World Report Radio here on the Great Logos Radio Network. My name is Tom Kiley, and don't ask me how, but I had the luck of the draw, I suppose. But I've got the honor to bring this program to you on Tuesdays and Thursday nights here on the Great Logos Radio Network. And we come to you in the same time period, 6 until 8 p.m. Central Time. And welcome to the show. Thank you so much for listening. Everybody, for all these years, I think we're in our 9th year now, 8th or 9th year. I'd have to go back to the archives, but it's something like that. And it's just been one pleasure and honor after another because of you, the INN World Report radio listening audience. I get to invite tremendous speakers and thinkers and writers and politicians and economists and regular folks and all kinds of people, activists who are doing great things around the world and struggling against the system that we live in, which is dominated by the few. That's the Greek term oligarchy. You hear me use it all the time on the show. Some of those oligarchs are extremely wealthy. Those are the plutocratic wing, I suppose, of the oligarchy. And, they think that they are special people because of their wealth and power, and sometimes even deluding themselves into thinking it's a genetic kind of a thing, that they should be, lording themselves over the rest of us. And I wouldn't mind if people did that, and they did a good job of it and save me the trouble. But no, it's typically based on a power and a profit motive, and that's not based on a people or a humanity motive. And so that's why we struggle to educate ourselves about that process, and that's what we do on the show. So there you have it. Now, the first hour of this evening's program will be open to your phone calls, 512-646-1984. You can get right in. I'm going to open them right now. Hold on one second while I throw the switch. And I got to get a sound effect for this. Okay, there you go. Phone lines are open, 512-646-1984. Anything you'd like to talk about. And then at the top of the second hour of this evening's program, we'll be joined by Raymond McGovern. It's been a while since Ray has been with us on the show, but always a pleasure. A happy warrior, served our country in several capacities in the military. I believe it was the Army. And then later on as a Russia analyst in the Central Intelligence Agency, where he briefed during their daily briefings, presidents such as Gerald Ford, I think even maybe Ronald Reagan, and even W. Bush, maybe H.W. Bush. They would alternate. I think he would go in there every other day, and give him the intelligence on the then Soviet Union. And Ray McGovern speaks Russian, knows a lot about Russia. And I asked him to come on because of this latest psychological operation that we're all being subjected to, the Panama Papers, where, just so happens that the enemies of the Zyokons happen to be targeted in these papers, and it's very convenient. And of course, Vladimir Putin, they want you to think Vladimir Putin is, the devil incarnate, Hitler de jure, as I put it, like that. And why? Because he's standing up to the Anglo-American oligarchs that run the roost. Anglo-American Zio oligarchs, probably we could throw in there as well. And, Russia's a great big country, always has been, coveted by the Western powers. The British have invaded there. Napoleon invaded famously in 1812 and left with his tail between his legs. And, of course, the Germans invaded brutally with tremendous loss of life, millions and millions and millions of civilians as well as military Russians perished in that terrible Operation Barbarossa. I think was in the spring of 1940 or the early summer of 1940, I believe it was. And just a terrible, terrible situation. So that is why there's been so many things leveled against the Russians. It's a big place. I think the Tsar of Russia, the last one, Nicholas, was probably the wealthiest man in the world at the time. And, it's a big place, but it's hard to control because it's so big. And therefore, the Russians have always had some sort of independence. I don't know. It's argued that with the Soviet Revolution, the Communist Revolution, that was a Western plot, to try to knock the Tsarist regime out, which it did. But then some people believe it went rogue and they lost control, the Western elites that were behind the initial revolution itself. That's an argument. And now they've been trying to regain control, certainly at the end of the Soviet Union. We sent in the best and the brightest and totally, really destroyed Russia even further from any kind of a quick recovery. It had been rebooted, the economy of Russia. The oligarchs, the aristocrats who owned everything were dispossessed of all of that. And it's, theoretically belonged to the people. So you had all these factories and, steel mills and great, works and universities and hospitals and all kinds of public infrastructure that theoretically belonged to the people. And we sent in these neoliberal economics people who said, no, sell it off, private. And so they bought up Russia for a song and created this very ugly class of oligarchs, which were choking the country even further. And then Vladimir Putin came along and sort of like the sheriff riding into town and put a stop to a lot of that. And again, ruined the plans of Western banksters to get back in there and take over. So he's being vilified. That's what happened in these Panama Papers, even though he wasn't even mentioned at all. Anyhow, so we'll have Ray McGovern on to talk about that and some other things. Meanwhile, in 5 days here in my state of New York, where I come to you live from Brooklyn, New York, every Tuesday and Thursday night, as I mentioned, we've got our presidential primary coming up. Now, I know many of you listening are in Texas, and you had yours already. And so ours is coming up. It's a big prize, a lot of delegates. And tonight, just after the program, I believe, we'll start a so-called debate between Hillary Clinton and the insurgent Bernie Sanders. So that ought to be very interesting. It's not going to be on the air while we're on the air, so I can't give you a blow-by-blow. But I think Ray will probably have a few things to say about that. It's a mess. It's a mess. The global economy, locally here in the United States and Europe, it's really crazy. And friends, this is the 21st century. I don't know about you. I was born in the middle of the last century and experienced tremendous progress in human development in this country. And, can do was the attitude. And so many things were getting straightened out and solved and made better. And for a lot of people, not for everybody, but we had the hope that as things progressed, it would be more greatly shared. And we called it the American middle class, and it was a beautiful thing. And now it's all being taken back. It's all being taken away. And I submit to you folks that this is ridiculous. And at this point in human development, we should be experiencing a much, much better system of interacting with each other and interrelating with each other economically and on so many other levels. And we're not. And it's, in my opinion, there's a lot of causes, but in my opinion, the main thing is that this oligarchy of which I spoke earlier is entrenched, and they've never been about that. As every day goes by, we go more into the future. We got iPhones now and technology that allows you and I to have this show together every week that didn't exist only just a few years ago. And as time marches on, the ancient system of creating money and banking and all that just gets less and less able to cover a modern world in a way that makes it more equitable for everybody. And it's just becoming a really big problem. And there's a rebellion going on. It started in Europe, I think, with the Greeks, went to Spain, Podemos, the party there in Spain. In France, Marie Le Pen is getting a lot of attraction on the far right. The elections recently in Ireland shook up the status quo. In Portugal, now there's rumblings going on even in Germany. And here on this side of the Atlantic, it's the anger, the justified, well-placed anger that seems to have the news media all crazy because, angry. The news media, our punditry, can't explain Donald Trump and Bernie Sanders. They can't because they're too busy telling us lies about how great everything is. And why should anybody be angry? Why should Donald Trump attract any votes? Well, because people don't believe their lies anymore. Thank goodness. It's changing all the time, thanks to the alternative media, in my opinion, largely. But even in this country, there is a rebellion going on against it. So we're going to see what's going to happen. Very, very interesting. And that's it. So we have this crazy election going on right now where this is happening. If it's suppressed, if Sanders or Trump does not win, and the party apparatus that brought you this disaster is allowed to continue, and probably in the form of Hillary Clinton, it'll just get worse. And the system is going to snap and change, either hopefully through a peaceful political process, or who knows? It depends on how deeply entrenched that greed is. We say it on the show all the time. The British organization Oxfam does the numbers on this all the time, and there are 60 people on planet Earth who are in possession of half of planet Earth's wealth. That should tell you everything you need to know. And we talk about sustainability. How can we talk about sustainability if that's the case? What are we really talking about? We're talking about sustaining those 60 people. That's what's sustainable. You got to do more with less, so those 60 can keep half the world. That's what it's all about. Anyway, Tom Kiley, INA. Give me a call, 512-646-1984. Phones are open.
You are listening to the Logos Radio Network. LogosRadioNetwork.com.
Baby ambassador to England or France, may like to gamble, might like to dance, maybe the heavyweight champion of the world, but you got to serve somebody. Hey, you gotta serve somebody. Maybe the devil case. Maybe a businessman, some high-degree thief. May call your doctor, may call your chief. You got to serve somebody. Oh, serve somebody. Might be the devil all along, but you got to serve somebody. Maybe a state trooper, maybe a young Turk, maybe the head of some big TV.
Take the great Etta James singing the great Bob Dylan. You got to serve somebody, and we try to serve all y'all. And that's what it's all about. How about some phone calls back in there, though? But I need some feedback. 512-646-1984. Now, I would especially love to hear from someone who hasn't called in yet, but has been listening to the show. And also from the women. You know, we don't get as many women calling, and we know you're out there. And it's so important to have a balance. You know, the world is it's the yin yang and that sort of thing, and you need two wings to fly straight. And so, you know, thank goodness we have alternative perspectives and in the world, and we welcome the participation and perspective of women out there who are listening to the show. So, and especially a woman who hasn't called yet. Wow, that would be fantastic. And if you don't agree with me, I don't, somebody who doesn't agree with me, call in and, you know, let's discuss it. You know, I like to talk to anybody. And let's see. I want to just check one other thing for you. I think our okay, we still have a fundraiser going on too over at the network. If you can find it in your heart and your pocketbook to go over there and check it out, logosradionetwork.com. You know, it all goes to keeping the shows on the air, you know, servers and paying bills and things like that. It does not go to paying the hosts of the shows and that sort of thing. So, that would be great too. So there you have it. 512-646-1984. Who's going to call in first? It's not hard. I don't know. I guess I don't listen to enough other shows, but I'm always amazed at some of the comments that you folks provide me with. For instance, that I'm so tolerant of people and guests and callers, and I don't yell at them and stuff. I don't know. Do people do that? I mean, why would you do that? I could disagree with people, but and I've been accused of, you know, cutting people off sometimes and all, and you know. So tell me about it. Sometimes there is talking going on over each other, and that's not so good. But in any case, what do you think? 512-646-1984. We are in very interesting times. I must say, and I have said it on the show, I'll say it again tonight, I'm extremely proud of how the alternative media has been handling these Panama Papers. Very early on, a lot of people are jumping on this thing. They're seeing through it. It's just a smokescreen. You know, it's something to attack. It's a psychological operation to attack enemies of the globalists, you know, who want to continue to exert their control. Look who's being, you know, caught in this web. I love it. You know, the Prime Minister of Iceland has to step down. Well, Iceland, you know, rebelled against the bankers and put some of their bankers in jail. And they're experimenting with, you know, better ways of creating money over there. So, of course, it doesn't surprise me that it turns out that some of these people that are being named and called out in these Panama Papers are people like that. Venezuelans, of course, they hate Venezuela because Venezuela, like Libya, one of these countries that has the audacity to use its mineral wealth. In the case of Venezuela and Libya, you know, oil. In case of Libya, water as well, for the benefit of its people, or at least more to the benefit of its people than is tolerable by the oligarchy. You know, you ever see that bumper sticker? What's their sand doing over our oil? I always get a kick out of that one when I see it once in a while. What's their sand doing on top of our oil? You know, I like the other one too. Have you ever seen this graphic? It looks like the odometer in your car. You know, 3 or 4 white. You know, that was like a little dial, and it says the letter I on the left one, and the letter R on the center left one, and then on the center right and the far right one, they're turning over like your numbers do on your odometer on your car. So you see half a letter on the bottom and half of the letter on the top of each one. So you see IR, and then it's AQ is rolling out of you, and IRAN is rolling into view on the bottom. It's so funny, that graphic, it's like the odometer on your car. We did Iraq already. Now we got to go after Iran, IR and then AQ rolling out and IRAN rolling in. It's a good one. I saw another good graphic today, or not today, the other day. I get some good email. You can send me email, info@innradio.com. And it shows, it's a cartoon, black and white. And if you could imagine a square, sort of like with a diagonal going through it, and on the upper side of the diagonal in the square is just a bunch of protesters, with signs and making noise, and they're protesting against bankers and that sort of thing. It's sort of a Occupy Wall Street kind of thing. And then totally across the diagonal is a line of police. Okay, and they're all in, SWAT team riot gear. They're facing the protesters, so you see their back, and they've got, helmets on, and it says police on the back of each one, dressed in black, head to toe, helmets, boots, the whole nine yards, truncheons, shields. And behind the police, there's these bankers walking. It's the old-fashioned Monopoly, caricature of a banker, with the top hat and the, monocle and, the top coat and everything. And these bankers are walking behind the guy. So the graphic is that the police line is protecting the bankers from the angry mob who are upset with bankers. And the bankers are walking by behind the cops. And one is saying to the other, I wonder if they'll still protect us when they find out we're raiding their pension fund or something like that. Very interesting. Very funny. So what do you think? 512-646-1984. Very interesting, article I saw about these Panama Papers, I should say. Indicating that there could be some internecine fighting going on at the top in our oligarchy. And by the way, I've got Joseph Farrell is going to be coming on the show in May. If you're familiar with the work of Joseph P. Farrell, very, very interesting. A good friend of mine, activist Steve White, has been trying to get me to get Joseph on the show for some time. Joseph deals in a lot of interesting things. He's a doctor, I believe. He's got a PhD, and including, what happened to the Nazis and a lot of their technology and that sort of thing. But he gave a very interesting talk I saw on YouTube about the oligarchy and the banking system and the banking the finance oligarchs, and they go how far back they go, and they're black magic with money and that sort of thing. So he's going to come on the show. We're going to be talking about that. But some commentary that I saw about the Panama Papers was very, very interesting, suggesting that there is some fighting going on at the top. Now, the very idea of an oligarchy is a collection of powerful people who want to run the show and are running the show and feel they should be running the show and that sort of thing, as opposed to a dictator or a tyrant who could be singular or the front person for a group. And by its very nature, it's kind of like the mafia. Nobody's strong enough to run it, so they collectively run it. But that doesn't mean they wouldn't off each other if they could. We'll talk more about this right after this break.
Don't believe everything you read about radio frequency microchips or RFID. It's a stealthy technology with some shocking applications, but some plans are pure imagination. I'm Dr. Catherine Albrecht, and I'll be back to separate fact from fiction.
Privacy is under attack. When you give up data about yourself, you'll never get it back again. And once your privacy is gone, you'll find your freedoms will start to vanish too. So protect your rights, say no to surveillance, and keep your information to yourself. Privacy, it's worth hanging on to. This public service announcement is brought to you by StartPage.com, the private search engine alternative to Google, Yahoo, and Bing. Start over with StartPage.
Radio frequency identification, or RFID, is a technology that tracks objects using radio waves. Yes, there are plans to put the chips into consumer products. There's an implantable version, and governments and businesses want to use it to track people. But some reported applications are hogwash. Example, the NutriSmart RFID food system. It's an absurd notion by college student Hans Harmes. His prototype system envisions RFID tags in food to track what we eat from plate to potty. While there are ingestible RFID tags, fortunately, the NutriSmart RFID system is pure science fiction, at least for now. I'm Dr. Catherine Albrecht. More news and information at CatherineAlbrecht.com.
Looking for some truth? You found it. LogosRadioNetwork.com.
right, good friends. Welcome back. Tom Kelly, INN World Report Radio. And let's see. Our good friend Gilad Otzman seems to be online too. Boy, maybe I'll see if we can get him on. But speaking of good friends, our good friend Ray McGovern will be joining us in about, a little less than 30 minutes now. RayMcGovern.com. That's his website, RayMcGovern.com, RayMcGovern. And he's cranking them out. New article just from yesterday, how an Iran war was averted. Panel discussion of the documentary film Drone. Ray interviewed on the offshore corruption revealed in the Panama Papers and why Putin once again is the designated villain by association, innuendo, and extraordinary use of the subjunctive mood. Now, Ray will say it. Putin. They're all talking about Putin in these Panama Papers, which were released through a leak supposedly about some Panamanian law firm that's facilitating all these people hiding their money offshore and stuff. Yet supposedly there's nothing in there about Putin. A friend of Putin is mentioned in these things, but not Putin. So therefore, it's got to be Putin, right? So like that. And the other thing that's very, very interesting that was caught right off the bat by a lot of people, the organization that got these leaks is supposedly an international, investigative journalism, think tank organization. And who are they funded by? The usual suspects, Soros, Rockefellers, the whole nine yards. So of course it's not going to have anything that's going to lay a glove on them, which goes back to what I was saying before. If somebody would call though, 512-646-1984, I would be happy to speak with them. And while I'm waiting for that to happen, I'll finish what I was saying in the last segment that, some people think that there could be some actual warfare going on right now at the top. The Romans recognized the value of oligarchy. You had these Roman families that were very powerful and they all wanted to be the boss and they were killing each other, to do that. And at a certain point, they decided, hey, we got to come up with a better way than just killing each other. Why don't we join together? And they formed what they called the Republic, and the rich people got seats at their Senate and so forth. And they would appoint a leader with a term of a year or something like that, and or two leaders, and they would be out of power and automatically within a certain period of time. They would appoint their generals and give them commands and stuff. The famous expression "crossing the Rubicon," right, is supposed to be about a law that they had in ancient Rome, because they never wanted their generals who were outside of Italy to return to Italy with their armies, because maybe one of these generals wanted to take over the government. So if they came back to Italy with their full army, how would they know what their intentions were going to be before it was too late, before they made it all the way to Rome? So there was supposed to be a river in the north of Italy. Italy's shaped like the great boot that comes out of the belly of Europe there. So if you're returning from Gaul or from Spain or whatever, and you got to come in through overland, you're going to come in that way. And there's supposed to be a river up there. It was called the Rubicon River. So you were not allowed to cross the Rubicon River with your army. If you were a returning general, your army you could take some people, but not the army. It would have to stay on the other side. And that way they could tell that you had good intentions. Now, if you crossed the Rubicon with your army, it would then be assumed that you were coming in to take over the government, and they could prepare. That gave them enough time to try to fend you off. So there's a little bit of history there. And by the way, it's very, very interesting. If you ever get the chance, I love Europe. I love traveling around, seeing the history, and I've spent a lot of time in Italy. Northern Italy, you've got the Piedmont on the west side of northern Italy, and that's where also, that's where you also have Tuscany over on that side and so forth, Florence and Turin, the old capital, Torino, up at the top there near the border with Switzerland. And then you've got on the west side, you've got the Veneto, you've got the Venice side and all up with the Austrians rather than the French and the Swiss being right up against each other. So Turin Torino used to be an old Roman fortress town, where a garrison town where they would, prepare to go north across the Alps into France and Germany and so forth. That's what Turin originally started. You can see some of the old Roman walls there still, and they used to lay their towns out like their camps and stuff. Very, very interesting. Okay, so we've got Tom in Texas on the line. You can be next, 512-646-1984. Hi, Tom. Great name you got there. How you doing tonight?
Hey, I'm doing fine. My parents, like you, knew how to pick them. What can I say?
Yeah, there you go. What's up? What would you like to talk about?
Well, actually, I wanted to talk about sort of the Trump and Sanders and the Republican Party. But the first thing I just wanted to say, you started talking about Italy and the Romans and all that. And really, if you think about it, it's amazing that from about 300 BC to about 400 AD, there was no power militarily or economically that really could challenge Rome. I mean, I guess maybe some of the Chinese emperors or some of the Indian emperors might have had a say-so in it. But in terms of taking on the Romans anywhere in the Mediterranean or Europe, forget it. You weren't going to win.
And they were ruthless. Even if they didn't get you the first time or the second time, that would just make them madder. They were like a nest of hornets. They'd come back more than ever because they didn't want anybody to ever see anybody kicking their butt.
Yeah, that was sort of it. We can't have this out there because then there'll be rebellion in the whole empire and we'll have trouble. But, they wound up having trouble anyway. But one thing I was thinking about, the appeal of Donald Trump and the appeal of Bernie Sanders on the Democratic side, and I hate that whole right-left fake BS stuff, but is that Trump has not been beholden to the party for money like all the other candidates are on the Republican side. And Bernie is sort of the same way from what I've heard is he's getting a whole lot of money coming into him, but it's like in small amounts, $50 check here, $75 check there, $10 check here, but he keeps getting these checks continuously. So he's got enough money to keep going against the Clinton war machine, so to speak. And I think that's why Trump is being ripped to shreds by, the Republican establishment. And I think that's why Sanders is being he's not being ripped to shreds, but he's sort of being, oh, yeah, he's just that crazy old man. It reminds us of all, the crazy old uncle we all had.
Yeah, Ross Perot used to talk about the crazy aunt in the basement. If you remember, he referred to the debt as that. I think it's really important to before I get to Donald Trump or Bernie Sanders, I get to the global insurgency around the world of people who are fed up with the way our world is being run. Donald Trump and Bernie Sanders happen to be the people who are smart enough to ride the crest of that wave. And if it wasn't them, it'll be somebody else. So I think it's important to keep that into perspective. Donald Trump didn't create the anger. He's recognized it and he speaks to it. And the anger is saying, hey, nobody else is talking about it. So I'm going to let Trump speak for it, warts and all, mistakes and all. And to a certain amount, to a certain extent on the Democratic side, for those who can't stomach a Republican, Bernie Sanders is filling that role. That's the start. Does that make sense?
No, that makes perfect sense. And I think you hit the nail right on the head with it. And that is a lot of what's going on. They both recognize it. There's no doubt about it.
It's not them. It's the anger. They're just the front man for it, And then when it comes to control and money, that's a big subject too. But we're running out of time for this segment. Please hold on. And when I come back, I'll give you my thoughts on that since you asked. It has to do with money, but I think there's more than that. Tom Kiley, INN. You can be next, 512-646-1984.
Easy.
Oh yeah, the great Alvin Lee going home. All right, really good guitar player, good musician, good bloke. But speaking of good blokes, we got Tom on the line in Texas, and you can be next if you'd like. 512-646-1984. Tom, you still there?
I'm still there. I would say put Scottish John in the category of good bloke, and you could probably leave me out, and you're safer.
All right, SJ, I know you're listening. The challenge has gone out. Why don't you give us a ring, buddy? But meanwhile, you also mentioned about, Trump and Sanders to another extent being independent of the party money. I think it's a lot bigger than that because, to the extent that the party money is what these candidates are relying on, that's one thing. And then you also mentioned the Clinton war machine. The Clinton war machine is more like the Clinton war contractor, if you ask me. The oligarchs they're the war machine. They're the war everything. And they just need contractors to do their bidding, you know. And when it comes to being the front person or the commander in chief, they contract that job out, the presidency. And they pick the people who they know are going to do what they tell them to do. And the parties, both parties are so corrupted right now that that's what their job is to ensure that only the people that the oligarchs and AIPAC, for instance, approve of, could even have a shot, you know, at getting in there. And here you have Trump and Bernie Sanders, both of whom are not these anointed people. Now, I think on the Democratic Party side, Bernie was just supposed to be a stalking horse, you know, to make it look like Hillary wasn't the queen who was anointed already and appointed, right? You needed somebody, you know, and it's like, yeah, okay, fine, let's let this old coot run. He's a socialist. You know, he's not going to get anywhere. And then on the Republican side, of course, everyone just treated Trump as a joke, and he wasn't polished, he wasn't official, and they were going to make short work of him. And now, obviously, that's not the case, because here's what you have to consider. You take Bernie and you take Trump out of the picture, and what do you got left? Nobody is speaking to this anger. I don't care if it's Ted Cruz or Hillary Clinton. It's the same old drivel you hear from them. You know, I heard from politicians 20 years ago, small business is great. We got to, people need opportunity, as if there's no problem.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's the same thing. It's like we have to cut taxes, increase opportunity, and get rid of, dumb regulations. And it's the same thing. It's almost like a politician saying, I want to be tough on crime and I'm for education. Well, who isn't? That's not saying anything. And that's, I think you're right. I think that's why Trump on the Republican end and Sanders on the left, because they're actually speaking about things that a lot of people would like to hear more discussion on. But you're alluding to the candidates that are tied in with the parties. You know, that's the quid pro quo. We give you the money and everything, but you don't talk about these subjects.
Well, that's the thing. See, the system screens out, blocks out anybody who's going to go off message. And you have to consider also that this system is not just the political parties and the politicians in it. A very, very key component is the media as well. So the media has a script that they're allowed to stay within, and the politicians do, and it reinforces each other, okay? Because what happens? The minute you get Donald Trump talking about stuff that's on everybody's mind, but it's like the emperor's new clothes, you're just not allowed to talk about that. You know, what happens? The news media can't back him up because they can't talk about that either. So they'll, Donald Trump, angry voters, you know. What a bombshell to say that the weapons of mass destruction was a lie. Everybody knows that, but it's never been said. It's not allowed to be said. So, this is this total control that they have. And to your other point, how much more, we've been bleeding with this neoliberal economic program for so long. And they say the problem is that we haven't bled enough. We need more of this stuff. It's crazy.
No, I agree with you. It's gone beyond absurd. And I think part of the problem is, and I think why people are listening to your show and people like Alex Jones or just anything that appears to be somewhat alternative is simply because, Tom, I don't even know who the news anchors are on the major networks anymore. It's been that long since I watched the news. Is Katie Couric still doing it?
I don't know, and I'm with you. I am monitoring the news more now in the last 6 months because of the election and frankly because of Trump and Sanders. And I'm just shocked at how far out these people are and how much they get paid and how stupid they sound. I mean, I'm sure some of them are not stupid, but most of them are. But you and the INN World Report listening audience knows a lot more about world events than they do, clearly. It's crazy.
No, I mean, look, you're in the business and you see it, that how many people in the media now, I'm sure Walter Cronkite was paid quite well while he was at CBS and he was, the anchor for 20 some odd years. But it wasn't to the extent that the anchors are paid now, and even the people below the anchors. You start making $400,000, $500,000, $600,000 a year. You're doing that. You like sitting and eating good food at nice restaurants and driving nice German luxury cars and going to the Hamptons and skiing in all these places.
And having everybody kissing your butt and having limos take you everywhere. A politician once put it, it's real hard to get used to going back to steerage once you've been used to first class,
Very true, very true. But no, the other thing, and I'll hang up so people can call in, but the one thing I was wondering about, and it seems to me like right now that the Republican Party has got a really big PR problem because this effort to stop Trump, it looks so preposterous that to me and to a lot of other people I've talked to, it almost looks like what they are telling everybody who's voted so far is that, look, it doesn't matter whether you voted in a primary or a caucus, how much time you volunteer to organize. In the end, your vote doesn't mean one thing unless we say it means something. And that, I think what's going to happen is a lot of people who have voted in that party are going to look around and say, you know what? I know how to solve this. I'm just not going to vote in your primaries anymore. I'm going to go someplace else and vote. And I don't know how they're going to be able to spin that back around.
Well, and there you have it. That's Donald. I don't care if you're a wild-eyed liberal who would never vote for Donald Trump in 1,000 years. We all owe him a debt of gratitude because he's bursting the bubble. The pus is coming out. Now we're getting to see what's really going on, and they're reacting like that. They're going off the handle. The Republican Party, as a party, has about run its course anyway. It has to change, or it's going to go the way of the Whigs. You know, it has to, or either way, you know, and that's fine. That nothing lasts forever anyway. And Donald Trump, ironically, he represents a crossroads for the Republican Party. They can either become extinct a lot faster by showing everybody, like you say, it's a slap in the face. Everybody who's voted for Donald Trump is an idiot, angry white male who's voted wrong. And that's not true. He's getting a lot of Democrats. Okay. Or Donald Trump can actually turn the party around and bring it back to its origins, which was the party of Lincoln, you know, and Teddy Roosevelt, maybe, you know. So, but it's a power struggle. They would have to give up a lot of power to Donald Trump because, let's face it, the presidential nominee, and especially if he goes on to be president, he's the leader of the party.
He is. And I'm looking forward, and I haven't said this in many, many years, but I'm looking forward to seeing what happens in Cleveland because I want to see it turn into a debacle. I want to see it be just completely unscripted. And I want to see Trump basically just walk off that stage and take half the people in that auditorium out the door with them. And everybody looking around going, we just saw the death of the Republican Party here. What happened? You know, or see how they're going to try to spin it to make it sound like it wasn't that bad. But I think it's going to be one of these things that we're all going to look back in 20 years and go, wow, I remember watching it that night that it happened.
It could be the Republicans' version of the 68 Democratic convention where there was literally riots in the street. You know, I don't want there to be violence. I don't know that there would be, but there will certainly be the political version of that if they're stupid enough. And, you know, hey, it could be just what the doctor ordered. It could be a purgative. You know, if these people are so entrenched, they're going to sink their teeth into it until the party goes all the way down to tubes. And they're freaking out because their money isn't making a difference anymore. They threw so much money at Trump to try to stop him. And that's freaking them out more than anything else, that their money isn't working anymore. So who knows? It could be very, interesting. And, listen, Hillary Clinton, she's in trouble too. Bernie Sanders has just won like 8 or 9 of the last, he's won every one of the last primary caucuses, but one of them, I think. And that's freaking the Clinton people out. And tonight, after this show, there's going to be a debate here in New York, here in Brooklyn. I'm in Brooklyn. The Hillary Clinton's campaign headquarters is in Brooklyn, literally about 5 blocks down, about 7, 8 blocks down the street from me is, or to the north of me, on the way to the Brooklyn Bridge is Hillary Clinton's campaign headquarters. And they're having this debate tonight between Bernie and Hillary right here in Brooklyn as well. So this should be very interesting. We should see what happens tonight. But she's in trouble. She's in big trouble.
What do you think? I mean, what's the feel in New York? You live up there. I mean, I hear a little bit of it on the news, but I'm sort of, from what I've been able to hear, it sounds like Sanders is going to win it.
That would be great. That would be great. And I wouldn't be surprised if he did. You know, that's a very fluid situation. I'm a little more in touch with the Donald Trump side, which he's clearly going to win, and I hope he wins by big numbers. But a lot of people in New York know that Donald Trump is speaking for them. And it's not just the muckety muck. You know, small business people, especially particularly hard hit here in Brooklyn. And a lot of workers, a lot of even immigrants, African Americans, you know, they know this guy, and I hear it over and over again. The guy's run big businesses. He knows, you know, how to watch a bottom line and get things done. So we'll see. We shall see. But it's going to be a very, very interesting year, isn't it?
Well, we live in interesting times. Thanks, Tom. I'll let you go. I'll keep listening. Good night.
Great to hear from you, Tom. It's been a while. Thanks. And send me an email, too, if you'd like. info@innradio.com. Okay, we're going to take a break here at the top of the hour. And that's our theme music there. America from West Side Story, written about the west side of Manhattan, where they now have Lincoln Center. And we're going to take a break, and we're going to be joined by the great Ray McGovern when we get back. Ray serving this country for so many years in the military and the CIA, Russia analyst. Back with Ray just after this. Good friends, welcome back. Tom Kiley, INN World Report Radio. Now, Ray McGovern was on the line with us, and we're having a little bit of a technical issue at the moment, so he dropped off, but we will have him right back for you if you just hang out and wait just a moment. And while we're getting Ray back on with us, I'll remind you his website is raymcgovern.com, and a lot of great stuff there. Of course, he writes for Consortium News as well, which is a great website, consortiumnews.com, the great website by Robert Perry. Hi, Ray, are you there?
Yeah, I am. Mm-hmm.
Oh, good. Okay, he's back. Well, friends, as promised, it's been a while, Ray, since we've heard your dulcet tones on INO Report, and we're thrilled to have you back. Welcome back. See, there you. Yeah, he's got a bad internet connection, so let's go switch over to phone with him, Deb. Okay. Very good. Okay, we'll get Ray back on the phone. He's having a problem with the Wi-Fi there, so I think it's Wi-Fi problem. But there you have it. So we'll be speaking with Ray, and I want to talk with Ray about. I don't know. Why don't I just wait until he gets back online here? But we are both, Ray and I, fellow Cold War warriors. All right, and it doesn't get much better than what Ray was up to. Can you imagine studying the Soviet Union to brief the president about it every other day? And in my case, I was in West Berlin on the front line, the front line of the Cold War. You know, I don't know. You tell me. There's a lot of younger people. Okay, let's see. Is Ray on? 1 second. Let me switch over here. Okay. All right, Ray, are you there? Hello.
Hello, Tom. I am.
Okay. Yes, as is often the case, Raymond, you're such a powerful voice that the gremlins at the NSA don't like it, and they try to disrupt our communications on our radio program every time.
Well, actually, they have nothing to fear. Sidney Blumenthal told Hillary Clinton that I was harmless, so I guess I am.
Well, first they call you harmless, then they laugh at you, then they try to kill you, then they lose, right?
Yeah, hopefully we'll be able to go the whole hour without any of that happening.
Well, if it happens, there'll be plenty of killing going on immediately after this hour because, as you know, right here in Brooklyn, New York, where I'm talking with you from, former Brooklynite Bernie Sanders will be speaking with the would-be Brooklynite Hillary Clinton, and I say that because her campaign headquarters is about 10 blocks north of me on Clinton Street, by the way, very interestingly, here in downtown Brooklyn. So she's the carpetbagger. So before we get into any of the rest of it, what do you think about that, Ray? I know that you're going to be monitoring that as soon as the show's over. What's your take on this Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump insurgency?
Well, as a New Yorker myself, Bernie is the next best thing to a fellow from the Bronx. Now, my wife was born in Brooklyn. She moved up, she married up when she married me from the Bronx. But not everybody can be from the mainland of these continental United States. And Bernie has more claim on being a New Yorker, certainly, than or New York City type than his opponent. So it's going to be very interesting to watch this thing tonight because I guess it's the last debate, at least before the New York primary.
Oh yeah, and I'll be voting in about 5 days. I think it's going to be on the 19th, and it should be very exciting. And boy, hasn't it really changed a great deal just in the last month or two, right? I mean, I think it's probably been assumed that Donald Trump on the Republican side should take care of Ted Cruz handily here in New York. But I thought it was assumed also that the queen, the anointed one, Hillary Clinton, was going to cruise to victory very easily here in New York, too. Now that doesn't seem to be as assured, does it?
That's right. And, to the degree that New Yorkers don't know much about the record of foreign policy on either of these people, there's an attempt now to bring them up to speed, and that is taking the form of Scott Ritter and me holding a teach-in at Judson Church downtown near NYU, and on Sunday evening at 7 o'clock, from 7 to 10, we'll be holding this teach-in talking about the foreign policy record of both candidates on the Democratic side. We don't think the Republican side really has much to offer in terms of experience on foreign policy, although they have some very, very interesting, let we say, views. But there is a distinct difference between Bernie and Hillary on kernel issues, basic issues of foreign policy. And that's becoming clearer and clearer as Bernie is prepared to speak out a little bit more clearly and more directly, exposing some of the things that have gone on since Mrs. Clinton voted for the Iraq War, which pretty much has the whole Middle East now in turmoil.
Signed the death warrant of the Libyans, got behind the death warrant of the Syrians and, Central America and on and on. Well, God bless. I didn't know, Ray. I'm going to come down and hang with you guys. Judson Memorial Church, for those of you who don't know, it's right by NYU in the Greenwich Village. And, it's a famous, place where, counter voices have been heard for many decades, no?
It is. It's a famous place, and we're just delighted that we're able to arrange this at short notice. There is a possibility it will be mainstreamed, not mainstreamed, but live streamed. And if that happens, so much the better. But people can't count on that. So bring all your friends. Judson Memorial Church there it's right outside of NYU, 4th Street, I think. And it's going to be a good evening because nothing like this has happened before. Scott has the book on one of the candidates. I won't mention her name, but he tried to tell her before she voted for Iraq that there were no weapons of mass destruction there. I'll say that again. That Scott Ritter, the chief UN inspector for Iraq, wanted to tell her that he knew personally that there were no weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. And guess what? She wouldn't let him in the door.
Nor would CBS, NBC, CNN, all the rest, where he was the darling of the cable talk shows after the first Iraq war, when he was complaining about how Saddam Hussein was blocking their progress, to get into these palaces and inspect. Boy, they'd have him on all the time. But guess who did have him on? They wouldn't let him on before the second Iraq war, but guess who did have him on to tell a national audience that there would be no weapons of mass destruction found?
I'll bet it was Tom Kiley.
Little old INN World Report at a Tribeca in New York. We had Scott Ritter on.
Right.
And we told this country in no uncertain terms on national television, and we don't have any budget at all, so these clowns with the millions and millions of dollars could have had him on as well. So that tells you a lot. And I would be happy to see Scott, because he really, after he blew the whistle on that, boy, they really came down on him hard, didn't they?
Yeah, they did. The typical, efforts to marginalize him. I would point out that there's lots of stuff that New Yorkers don't know about their senator, including the fact that Scott was not only the chief UN inspector for Iraq, but that he was a constituent. I mean, he's a New Yorker.
That's right. He lives upstate. Yep. That's true.
Yeah, and so it's really, really good that he's coming down, and we're not only going to do that gig, but we have a gig in SUNY Purchase up there. Purchase around White Plains. Do I have that right? It's up there in Westchester.
It's a little further up than that, I think. Yeah, but it's on the way up there.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah.
So we'll be up there the following day. That is Monday, the 18th, for a noontime expose. And what we're trying to do, quite simply, Tom, is that we know a lot of stuff. Americans don't know a lot of stuff, and it's really not really their fault, because you don't get this stuff from the New York Times, you don't get it in the Washington Post. So unless you know where to look on the web, you're
or on INN War Report Radio or Russia Today or what have you. The alternative.
That's the web. That's the web.
Yep,
see?
Yep,
so
yep.
So it's no wonder people are not well informed on these things. And since Scott and I both lived and ate and lived through this very painful period. And since we were writing all the time, I mean, it's kind of a no-brainer. We don't have to do any homework. We just kind of rise up what we try to find in my files, what we wrote at the time, and just kind of telling New Yorkers, hey, look, Hillary says that she regrets it was a mistake. New Yorkers, please listen. It wasn't a mistake.
That's right.
It was a calculated, cynical, political move. Why? Because she wanted to show how tough she was, so that one day she'd become president, right? It's very simple.
Quite clear.
Ironically, 8 years ago, it was her Achilles heel, and it should be her Achilles heel for both heels forever. Because, as I say, she didn't want to hear. She didn't want to hear about this. She didn't let Scott Ritter through the door. She didn't go down and read the National Intelligence Estimate before she voted for the war. So all this stuff is on the record. It's not any dirt that we've dug up. It's things we reported at the time, not in the major media, so-called, but in places like yours and others. And so we think, I guess, being New Yorkers as well, we feel conscience bound to spread a little truth around before that very, very key primary, because I'm no political analyst of internal affairs in this country, but it seems to me that whoever gets the Democratic nomination will be our next president. And, I keep seeing Hillary's opponent win these primaries, but then the pundits always tell me that I can't win. He can't win. No, he can't win.
They poo-poo him. Hold on, Ray, because we got to take a break. As you can hear already, friends, it's great to be catching up with Ray McGovern. We're going to take a short break. We'll be right with him right after this. RayMcGovern.com.
This is the Logos Radio Network.
Friends, welcome back. Tom Kiley, INN World Report Radio. Like I said, one of the greatest happy warriors I know, Ray McGovern. He's here on the show with us tonight. It's been a while, and he submarined me. I didn't know he's going to be in town here in New York City on Sunday night. Anybody in the listening area, anybody knows anybody in New York, if you're not in the listening area, please, come down to Judson Memorial Church, just north of Washington Square, right there in the heart of Greenwich Village at NYU, to hear Ray McGovern and Scott Ritter, another great hero. What time is the event going to start Sunday, Ray?
It's at 7:00 on Sunday evening.
Okay.
We're going to get started right away, and the reason it's 3 hours is because this will be really a teach-in. In other words, we expect at least half the time to be devoted to questions and answers, and God knows there are enough questions out there, and I think we can supply some of the answers.
You can supply many of the answers. Is there a web page or anything for this, Ray, that people can refer to? I didn't even see it on your website. Maybe it's there. I didn't notice it.
Yeah. Well, Tom, this has all been just in the last couple of days arranged. We're trying to get it live streamed. We also have just today learned that SUNY Purchase is happy to host us at noon the next day. So I've just been overworked here. But I'll send you the flyer, and I'll put it in a way that you can disseminate it. And I'm grateful for you passing the word, because all we're trying to do, Tom, is spread some truth around. It's in short supply, but how do I say this? It's vital before the 19th of April, because that's the day, in my view, that the next president will be, in effect, elected.
Ray, if you shoot me an email with the text, I'll make a flyer for you tonight if you want. I'll put your picture in there. I'll put Scott's picture in there if I can, and a little information if you'd like. I'd be happy to contribute.
Well, I have to confess, Tom, that I looked up my email thing. I don't have an email address for you.
Okay.
Can you give it to me?
Yeah, everybody knows it. info@innradio.com. And I can call you right after. Well, you'll be watching the thing, but info@innradio.com.
I'll send it during the next break.
That's great. And so let's get back on it then. So this is really fantastic, Ray. I mean, Scott Ritter, both of you guys are the same ilk as far as I'm concerned. You served this country in the military and the intelligence services. And, both of you, Scott's no pushover. Scott, I thought, was like some kind of arch conservative, when I first used to hear him. And it turns out he's a transpartisan. He's a patriot. He's not stuck in the right left, just like you. And, certainly you briefed the presidents. I want to get into this a little bit later in the program, maybe about the Soviets and so forth. But you were telling me on break, fascinatingly, about the fact that this was just like, by the way, Donald Trump said it, didn't he? On stage during a Republican debate on national television, the weapons of mass destruction that Iraq supposedly had was a lie, and the Bush administration knew it was a lie. Now, you say whatever you want about Donald Trump, but I don't recall ever hearing anybody of that stature in the public eye say anything like that, much less on the stage of a Republican debate. What do you think?
That's when his unhappy colleagues really started to go against him and try to dethrone him. This is something you don't say. But, for those of us who are watching it closely at the time, Tom, it's very, very clear. We have documentary evidence. We know that, for example, 8 months before the war, George Tenet told the head of British intelligence that Bush had decided to do war for regime change in Iraq. Now, this was on the 20th of July, 2002. Sir Richard Dearlove, don't you love the names there? Dearlove was the head of MI6, the CIA equivalent. He went to Washington to find out, what was really going on. Bush and Blair were in touch about once a week by phone, but it's not the same. You need somebody to. So Blair sent Dearlove over to talk with George Tenet, who was head of the CIA, at CIA headquarters. I some friends were there. Okay, that was the 20th of July. Now, on the 23rd of July, Dearlove hardly had time to unpack. He's at 10 Downing Street with what I call the 12 apostles. Blair's 12 most senior national security folks, the head of the intelligence, head of the military, head of whatever. So they're all there. And how do we know this? I guess people need to know that first. I wasn't a fly on the wall. One of the participants took notes, same-day notes, and sent a memo around. It's since been called the Downing Street memo. It was leaked to the London Times, mind you, no left-wing rag, London Times, on the 1st of May, 2005. Okay, so too late to know about before, but what did it say? The first paragraph, I'll recite it. Got it indelibly imprinted on my mind. It said this: what we learned is that Bush has decided on regime change. It's going to be done by an attack that will be justified by the conjunction of terrorism and weapons of mass destruction. Now, translation from the British, we're going to say that Saddam Hussein has all manner of weapons of mass destruction and that he's going to give them to, guess who? Terrorists, okay? Then the crowning sentence. But the intelligence and facts are being fixed around the policy, period, end quote. Now, it was really funny. When this hit the press, it got very little play in these United States, but Fox News did do a number on it. The commentator said, no, please don't rush to any judgments here. Fixed, the word fixed, has a special connotation in British usage. So, Tom, I called my friend Harry in London. Harry, you got a second? Yeah, what's what? Well, just tell me, in British usage, what does the word fixed mean? Ray, you losing it? What's going on? Look, just tell me here. Fix? Well, you fix an election? You fix a horse? Oh, thank you very much, Harry. Fixed is fixed. There it was. Documentary evidence. How long did it take the New York Times and the Washington Post to disclose that? Not until Representative Conyers from Michigan convened a whole hearing on that on the 15th of June, 2005, just several weeks after the publication. So there's one thing, Another thing is that somebody leaked the minutes of a conversation between Bush and Blair in late January 2003, so just almost 2 months before the attack. And Bush is saying to Blair, hey, I know what we can do. Let's paint one of those UN observation planes flying over Iraq. Let's and have it shot down, and then maybe that would work,
I remember that, yes.
But the thing that really spoke to me is this. In late February, so just 1 month before the attack on Iraq, this is February 2003, this is a couple of weeks after Colin Powell had made a fool of himself by pretending there were weapons of mass destruction, and also links between Iraq and Al-Qaeda.
And let's not forget Donald Rumsfeld saying not only do they have them, but we know exactly where they are, right?
Yeah, that was fun when I called him on that. Anyhow, in Newsweek, in the Periscope section, it used to be just a little section. I don't know if they even have it anymore, but on, I think it was like the 28th of February in the online version, and then a couple of days into March on the printed version, here's this little report. There is a document that has been given to us, which purports to be the debriefing text of Saddam Hussein's son-in-law, Hussein Kamel, who defected to Jordan and was debriefed by CIA, MI6 in Britain, and the UN.
All right, we'll hold it right there. We know where it's coming from. We'll be right back with Ray McGovern just a second.
The fountain of youth? How about the fountain of health? Turmeric, a golden herb used in Indian cooking, contains an amazing compound that has researchers doing cartwheels. I'm Dr. Catherine Albrecht, and I'll tell you about terrific turmeric in just a moment.
Privacy is under attack. When you give up data about yourself, you'll never get it back again. And once your privacy is gone, you'll find your freedoms will start to vanish too. So protect your rights, say no to surveillance, and keep your information to yourself. Privacy, it's worth hanging on to. This public service announcement is brought to you by StartPage.com, the private search engine alternative to Google, Yahoo, and Bing. Start over with StartPage.
Turmeric Turmeric is the spice that lends that golden yellow color to curry dishes. It's been traditionally used in Asian medicine to treat everything from indigestion to arthritis. Now, Western doctors say curcumin, a compound found in turmeric, can help treat breast cancer and liver disease, reduce inflammation, and lower cholesterol. It may also help Alzheimer's disease, arthritis, irritable bowel syndrome, depression, and even lymphoma. You don't need expensive supplements to get the benefits. Turmeric is available in the spice aisle of your supermarket or as an ingredient in curry. Heat some oil in a pan, saute an onion, sprinkle in some turmeric, and add your favorite vegetable. Voila! No side effects and no prescription required. I'm Dr. Catherine Albrecht. More news and information at CatherineAlbrecht.com.
Chemtrails.
You're listening to the Logos Radio Network at logosradionetwork.com.
All right, good friends, welcome back. Let's get right back to it. Ray McGovern, our guest, and Ray has not been on the show for a while. I just found out. I am thrilled. He's going to be here in my town, in our town. Ray's a New Yorker also, with a fellow New Yorker, Scott Ritter, at Judson Memorial Church Sunday night. That must be Sunday, the 15th to the 17th, I guess. So two days before, right. 17th, 2 days before our primary here in New York, to talk about the foreign policy of the two Democratic, I guess. There's not much foreign policy to talk about Donald Trump. So you're going to limit this to the Democrat?
That would be kind of Comedy Central.
I don't know how comedy it is to say that the guy's been on the right side of it. The invasion of Iraq was wrong. I said we shouldn't do it beforehand. Libya was wrong. I said we shouldn't do it beforehand. Syria wrong. I said we shouldn't do it beforehand. Weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, a lie. Vladimir Putin, I could work with the guy. What he's doing in Syria is not that bad. I don't know. That sounds like better than Bernie and Hillary all put together to me, but that's just me.
Well, you're being very selective.
Right. I think he's
racist,
all,
for God's sake.
I think he's all wet with Iran. That's for sure. Yeah. But anyway.
Yeah. Well, Okay.
Yeah. But anyhow, his foreign policy has killed probably several million people less than Hillary's. But we'll continue. So we're on the edge of our seats. You were talking about this leaked document from one of Saddam Hussein's son-in-laws. Who I guess went to Lebanon.
You remember they defected to Jordan in 2005, no, I'm sorry, not 2005, in 1995. It was between the two Gulf Wars, and one of them, Hussein Kamel, was the son-in-law who was in charge, who Saddam Hussein put in charge of the biological, chemical, rocket, and what there was of a nuclear weapons program. So when he defected, man, the UN and CIA and MI6 interrogators were right there in Amman, and they're asking him all sorts of questions. And we know from the transcript that this is the way it went. So, Mr. Kamel, you say that you were in charge of these programs. What happened? Where are these weapons of mass destruction? And he looks at him and he says, you don't know? I mean, your inspectors verified that they'd all been destroyed. Oh, yeah, well, how do you know they were destroyed? He says, well, maybe you didn't understand. I told you at the beginning I was in charge of those weapons, and I ordered them. Isn't it the procedure in your country that when you're in charge of something, you order them destroyed, they get destroyed? I mean, what's going? Well, yeah, okay. Well, how do you know they were destroyed? Well, I sampled a couple of. Are you trying to get me to say? What's the deal here? Are you trying to get me to say they weren't destroyed? Yes, Scott Ritter. He knows they've been destroyed. So this is the way the transcript went. Okay, now it's documentary. It's authentic. You can see it. What does Newsweek do? Well, I had a chance to bring it up here on my computer. Here's the March 3 issue of the print version. It appeared earlier in the electronic version. Hussein Kamel, the highest-ranking Iraqi official ever to defect from Saddam Hussein's inner circle, told CIA and British intelligence and UN inspectors that he told them in the summer of 1995 that after the Gulf War, Iraq destroyed all its chemical and biological weapon stocks and the missiles to deliver them. Whoa! Now this is Newsweek, okay? He vouches for all this. He was interrogated several times, and the notes are authentic. So what does Newsweek do? Well, they boil it down into just a couple of paragraphs in their Periscope issue. And what happens then? Well, everyone knows that Bush and Blair are going to attack Iraq in just 3 or 4 weeks. So to do due diligence, our ever on the spot reporters go up to find out whether this is authentic. Who do they ask? They ask the CIA. They go to the CIA PR guy and say, "Wow, what did you tell us about this?" And he says, this is bogus. This is wrong. It's inaccurate. It's a lie. And our correspondents, our stenographers really in Washington said, well, thanks for telling us because, wow, we're about to do a story on this. Oh, God, it was just awful, okay? Now, that was there. It's since been attested to 1,800 times that was the debriefing report. But Newsweek was the only one to put it out. They put it out in this modest, and then as soon as the PR people at CIA said, "Don't worry about it. It's all wrong. It's inauthentic. It's bogus." That was the big bogus. Well, all the journalists said, "Oh gosh, we were going to." It was so bad, Tom. So there's all this stuff there that we know because we lived it. We lived through this. We tried to. But we, veteran intelligence professionals for sanity, wrote a memo to Bush, as we used to do, when we were on active duty, so to speak, memorandum for the president. Okay, subject, Colin Powell's speech earlier today. What do we say? We said that Powell's clearly leaning on intelligence analysts to come up with the, quote, correct answers. And we finished up by saying this, and I memorized this as well. Mr. President, we strongly advise you to widen the circle of your advisors beyond those clearly bent on a war for which we see no compelling reason and the consequences of which are likely to be catastrophic, end quote. Now, we take no pride or no glee or no nothing from that, given what happened. Look, millions of people dead, still more millions of people roaming around looking for a home in the Middle East, all directly resulting from that terrible decision. What I'm saying is that we warned the president 3 times before the attack. Scott Ritter was trying to warn Hillary Clinton, but she wouldn't let him in the door because she didn't want to know. It was not a mistake, Tom. It was a crafty, what she thought, sly, most cynical move to show how tough she was so that when it became her turn to become president, she could flex her muscles and say, "See, I voted for the war." If she just listened to us, she would have found that this is a fool's errand, and whoever votes for this war should be, and they haven't been yet, held accountable.
And the lie continues because I say this on our show here, Ray, if we, as represented by our government even, are half as much the good guys and the decent people that we, pound our chest and tell the world we are, wouldn't there be so much as a, oops, I'm sorry, we made a mistake? Have you ever heard anything like that?
Well, you don't understand that being the sole indispensable country in the world means you never say you're sorry.
Never having to say you're sorry. It's like love, I guess.
I say that cynically, but that's where it all starts. We're entitled. Ever since World War II, we were the guy on the mountain. We were the ones that had purview over what the world would do, and that's not going to be very much longer.
No, as if we won that war all by ourselves, and there was no such thing as the Red Army that faced 200 divisions, right? Which I'd like to talk with you, Ray. We're running out of time for this segment. We got about a minute left, but I do want to finish up with you talking about the Panama Papers, but more specifically, this attack on Russia and Vladimir Putin, this disgusting attack. I'll set it up so that we can get into it in the next segment. But I asked you to come on the show, Ray, because if anybody has any kind of background about this, it would be you in my circle that I can go to. You're my go-to guy for this kind of thing. We're both Cold Warriors. You were briefing presidents. I was on the front line in West Berlin. I didn't have any animosity for the young Russians that I faced. They were people too. I'd be curious to know, when you did all the work you did, was your heart filled with fear and dread and anger with these people, or were you doing your job?
Well, there's such a major difference between the people, Tom, and the people behind the missiles and so forth. We were in considerable danger, and to his credit, Kissinger played the Chinese off against the Russians and persuaded the Russians that they really needed to improve relations with us faster than the Chinese did. And as a result, partly as a result of that, the strategic arms limitation talks yielded the most stabilizing
increase in mental functioning.
friends, welcome back. Tom Kiley, INN World Report. Let's get right back to it. Ray McGovern, we've got one more segment, and then Ray and I and everybody has to go because the Democratic debate is going to be on right after this show. Ray, anybody who is in New York or knows anybody in New York, send them down to Judson Memorial Church on Sunday evening, 7 p.m. It's right by NYU and right north of Washington Square Park, where Ray McGovern and Scott Ritter, both champions of INN World Report, some of our greatest guests, will be speaking about foreign policy of the, at least of the Democratic candidates. It's going to be very, very interesting talk. Ray, I wanted to finish up with this demonization, this re-demonization all over again of Russia as if it was still the evil Soviets, as if nothing has changed, and how horrible it is. I really was really looking forward to the end of the Cold War. Is there any, what excuse, with the Soviets, it was they hate our freedom. They're hiding under each bed. They're going to come take us over. What kind of excuse are they trying to use to do what they're doing to Russia now?
Well, this thing called regime change, Tom. It's not limited to piddling countries like Iraq and Syria that we can change regimes in. They very much like to regime change the Kremlin. And this has been very clear. We have this National Endowment for Democracy now. It used to be called the Covert Action Staff of the CIA. It's the regime change folks. It's the propaganda folks.
The color revolution people.
Yeah, right. And, we know that they had 60, count them, 60 projects in Ukraine before the coup. We know that Victoria Nuland, a protege of Hillary Clinton, bragged about having invested, now get this, $5 billion with a B as in boy, $5 billion in Ukraine's aspirations toward the West. Okay? And then, of course, that the coup in Kiev, Ukraine, on the 22nd of February 2014 was, well, how shall I say this? You've heard the expression, the revolution will not be televised, right? Well, this coup was YouTubeized. There was nothing like it. What happened was our Assistant Secretary for European Affairs was talking with the U.S. ambassador in Kiev. His name is Jeffrey Pyatt. And she was saying, Jeff, we've got this thing wired. We've got it glued. Everything's falling into place. Yats is the guy. Yats is the guy. He knows about the central bank. He knows about the need for austerity. Yats is the guy. We're gonna get the UN involved because the EU, well, she used a word I can't use on the air. It begins with F and it has 4 letters. She said, F, the EU. This is the top diplomat, head of European Affairs in the State Department. So anyhow, that was put on YouTube because somebody intercepted, I imagine, the Russian security services. They put it on YouTube first week of February, and I wake up, Tom, on the 23rd of February in the morning. I turn the radio on, and whoa, there's been a coup in Ukraine. And guess what? Who's the new prime minister? Yats.
Our boy Yats. And Ray, I never failed to point out at this moment in the conversation that the Ukraine was scheduled for a vote in May, right, of that year. So you don't need a coup if all of your political machinations are going to result in your party winning. So this was a double. I mean, not only did they get rid of a democratically elected government, but they did it in such a way that democracy could not further, validate the fact that the people didn't want who Victoria Nuland wanted.
That's right. And, the first thing that the new government, which was immediately recognized by the United States, that's amazing, Yats's government, and he says, well, we ought to join NATO. Well, here's the red flag before the Russians. The thought of NATO being in Ukraine was something that if U.S. intelligence analysts didn't tell the president about, they are sorely derelict in their duty. It was utterly predictable that if this happened in Kiev, that Putin would seize Crimea because that's their only ice-free, warm-water port. It has been theirs since Catherine the Great at the end of the 18th century. They've got not only naval bases there, they've got air bases. That's a strategic asset that they were not ever going to give up, least of all, and with the threat of missile-carrying, anti-ballistic missile carriers there circling the Russia. So it was all entirely predictable. One might even think that, well, maybe they wanted Putin to do that, so they give him a bloody nose. They say he invaded Crimea, whereas in reality they were entitled to 25,000 troops in Crimea under an accord with the Ukrainian government. So
that's the damn lie. You know, even the liberals, Rachel Maddow talks about Russia's invasion of the Crimea. She's got a degree in political science. Come on, how stupid do you think people are? Did we invade Korea? You know, since, or is that why or any number of countries that we have military bases around? They're there by agreement. Number one. Number two, did Putin really have to seize the Ukraine, or were the Ukrainians themselves fed up enough to really vote? I mean, was that a fixed vote, or was it reflecting the anger of the Russian Crimeans?
Good question, Tom. The vote was monitored. It was a surprise to no one that 96% of the people wanted to rejoin Russia. They had been dislocated from Russia by a historical fluke. When Khrushchev came in after Stalin died, 1953, all right, he needed more support. And where do we get it? You get it from the Ukraine, that's where he's from. So he says, hey, I got an idea. Why don't we let's give Crimea to the Ukraine. That will win me some political points. So how did he do that?
Not by democratic vote and asking the people who live there. He didn't do that, did he?
No, it's called an ukaz, a directive. This is what it would be. So no one was consulted then. This time, Putin convened his most senior national security advisors on the 23rd of February, the day after the coup, and they, by open admission, by a videotape that they put out, they had to decide what was going to happen to Crimea. And they decided, well, maybe we ought to ask the Crimeans if they want to join NATO, if they want to be subservient to this Yatsenyuk government. So they did ask them. They had a plebiscite. And I told you the results, 96% voted to rejoin Russia. So that's what happened. So this was something that there's a cudgel now. Everybody says, including Rachel, invasion, they seized and all this stuff. But what they did actually, this is embarrassing. Let me tell you in this vignette type form. Here I am at a very progressive, it was Pax Christi, one of the Catholic peace organization, conference, okay? And the lady professor gets up and she says, hey, my son came back from Sunday school and he had done this great poster, only 10 years old, and it said, Putin, don't you know about the commandment that says, thou shalt not kill? And I looked at my confreres and oh wow, So, always the skunk at the picnic. Raise my hand. Professor, what are you alluding to? She says, well, all those Crimeans were killed when Russia invaded Crimea. I said, well, how many were there? She says, I don't know, hundreds, thousands probably. I said, would you believe zero? Oh, come on. I said, look, everybody's entitled to their own opinion, not to their own facts. You ought to get some facts here. No one was killed. There was 2 shots fired in error. So no one was killed or even wounded. They had the 25,000 or 20,000 already in place, and they very cleverly dressed them up without insignia and came to the ministries there in Crimea and said, well, by the way, there's been a coup here, but we're taking over from now. Please don't shoot at us because, we've got what we need to put you down. So it was a peaceful, quote, coup, if you want, in Crimea. There was a real coup in Ukraine. And they were getting back at Putin for doing a couple of things. One of which was rescuing our president, Obama, pulling his chestnuts out of the fire after he had decided not to do a war in Syria.
That's when they really started coming down hard on Russia.
Oh, man, They were cheated out of their war. Yeah. So Putin was going to pay a price. So that's part of it, but there's a lot more to it.
There's a lot more, and we're out of time. We only got a few minutes. I said, first of all, Rachel, when exactly, how many Russian troops were in the Crimea the day before this so-called invasion, and how many the day after, right? And like that, there's another point, too, about the Crimea that escapes me that I think is one more thing, Ray, very, very important. At the time of this democratic decision by the people of the Crimea to rejoin Mother Russia, where they came from, there was no legitimate government ruling their country, was there?
Well, it wasn't that you and I know of, but the United States had already recognized it.
No, they were like, we're without a country right now, and you know what? We don't like the mess that's happening. We're going to go join a real country. How about that?
Well, okay, yeah. Well, they didn't want to. Yeah, it was a bogus country, and sort of interestingly, Yats is gone. Yats is not the guy anymore. He had to step down just yesterday, so we're rid of Yats, but the whole place is a shambles. And the Europeans that were responsible for all this, together with the intelligence services of other countries, really bear a terrible responsibility for the chaos that now exists and the Ukrainian people are paying the price.
All right, good friends. That's it for tonight. Ray McGovern.